Okay, you guys, we're going to move forward into the conversation between Steve Goncalves and Brett Norton from back in 2023 that took place right after the grand jury and went on for a few weeks. Everything stated in this video is my opinion and my opinion only. And just like everything else in these cases we discuss here on this channel, everything is alleged. Now, if you missed the first episode, this is how this one ended. Steve Goncalves says to Brett Norton, they told the author they wanted to go inside the house and hear things first hand. This is about the grand jury members. The grand jury members in May of 2023 was telling everyone they wanted to hear inside the house. They needed to hear inside the home. The state already knew at the grand jury. They were already saying, we need to hear inside the house. I want to go to the crime scene. I want to go to the house this took place in. We need to see it firsthand. Knowing that, they still destroyed the house. So we're going to go ahead and pick up right here because the next message says, we have been fighting to keep the house, knowing this. Yeah, you might have been trying to keep the house, but I distinctly remember that Steve and Steve Jr. went on some island vacation around the exact same time that the house was being demolished. And it was a big topic of discussion between a lot of us content creators because we saw them out here talking about the house being demolished and knowing that they had an attorney and knowing that there were legal things that they could have at least tried to file in the courtroom if they really wanted to try to stop the situation. But instead, they just went on this island vacation, and no, not the entire family, just Steve and Steve Jr. It was all over, I believe it was the Goncalves family page, put that information on there about how the boys were not going to be around for a few days. And then the house got demolished, and then they showed back up on TV complaining about how the house got demolished. I mean, you have to look at those kinds of things. And yeah, people are going to be like, oh my God, you just expect them to not do anything? I don't expect them to go on some island vacation when the house is being destroyed. No, I don't. So this is also where Brett Norton brings up a picture of Kaylee with an ex of hers from like freshman year in high school. And they are talking about a guy named James Leonard. Now, James Leonard apparently took the life of someone. I don't really know that entire story. Again, the information in this screen recording, because it's screenshots of a screen recording, is pretty blurry in Brett Norton's conversation bubbles because of the color along with the white. To me, the white with the black lettering is a little bit easier to read. So I'm not really quite sure the entire situation with James Leonard, but I know that I remember hearing people talk about it around the time that these messages came out because Steve Goncalves mentioned this guy. And again, he's claiming that they spoke to the girlfriend of the James Leonard guy while he was in jail. Now, this is where Steve admits that the FBI is the one who found Bryan Kohberger, and that basically if it wasn't for the FBI, MPD would have had nothing. And I really question that because we know that MPD was working on a lead suspect that we now know was Jack Ducour, and they never actually cleared him. They didn't fingerprint him until May of 2025. His name stayed as the number one suspect on the Idaho State Forensic Police logs for all the lab work that was done. Even after Bryan Kohberger's name was added as a suspect, he stayed suspect number 2 with there being a lead suspect. And it was just recently that we found out in those unredacted documents that still have not been redacted and re-released that that number 1 name was actually Jack Ducour. So considering the fact that the FBI did everything, and again, this is a video that I still plan on putting together. They did the forensic downloads of the phone. They did the cheek swabs. They did the cell phone stuff that's bullshit. They did the car stuff that's been completely crap. They did literally all of it down to the arrest. And then every piece of everything that they did was slowly being erased by the judges and the motions in this trial, to where Brett Payne was designated by both sides to get on the stand after he was no longer working for MPD and was only going to be deputized in to have some sort of authority. He was going to take the stand and say that some tip came in on 12/19 and the FBI was never ever going to be mentioned. This was an FBI case. And they never showed any proof of their work to the state. That's why the state never had anything to give over to the defense. No one has shown their work. I remember failing shit if I didn't show my work back in school. And he says very clearly, they figured out who he was for them. Exactly. MPD literally did nothing because nothing was pointing to Bryan Kohberger. And even after everything went down with the DNA on the knife sheath, that's the only thing that leads to Kohberger. There is literally other DNA on the knife sheath itself that they never did any further testing on. Why would you just stop at one, knowing that this is a quadruple homicide? That's the most asinine thing I've ever heard in my life. Now, this is where he very specifically tells Brad Norton to pay attention to the timestamp of the 11/12 camera that he is sending to her. And it is 1:56. This is because she's claiming that she can hear a bunch of noises over on the Linda Lane cameras. And he's saying this camera is way closer and shows the girls getting dropped off. No one is getting killed at 1:56. And I will play the video again, the same way that I did in the first video. This does not show anyone getting dropped off. It is literally at an angle where you can see Jack Ducour's house at the upper left-hand corner, and even then you can still not see people going in and out. The 1122 house where Maddie and Kaylee were apparently dropped off at 1:56 is behind this camera. It does not show the girls getting dropped off. It shows a car pulling in at 1:56 and then pulling out about, I don't know, less than a minute later, right as Jack Ducour's driver is driving him into the neighborhood. All of that happened within less than a minute. But no, Steve Goncalves, it does not show the girls getting dropped off. And it can only be assumed because it's completely muted. Now, unless they have a version somehow that actually has sound, and they have refused to come out even after, guys, it's been since 11/4 that we started getting the information for the 11/12 cameras. On December the 4th is when we actually got the files themselves. So it has been a month and 10 days now that these files have been out and that we have been talking about how the crap is silenced and having all these issues with things. And he has still chosen to not say, hey, hold on, no, we have a version that has sound. And you know how I kind of know that he doesn't have a version that has sound? Because by now Gray Hughes would have released it. Unless he's playing it like really safe, it's not going to even matter at the end of my little series here, because Steve talking to Gray is very much mentioned by Steve in these messages. And we know that he's been talking to Gray, and we know that he talked for a while with Daniel, and we know that he had little people that he was doing certain things with and feeding them a bunch of false information just because he knew that they wanted the clicks for putting it out there. He didn't care that it was false. He just wanted it out there, and he knew the people like JLR and Gray Hughes that only cared about the clicks and not the truth, and we're going to just go ahead and jump on it regardless. So I feel deep in my little Cajun, Texas heart that if Gray Hughes had footage that had sound, it would have already been out there. Because Steve Goncalves would have thrown that out there, because I've been calling him a liar now for weeks. And again, I know they watch me because at some point they blocked me on Facebook, and they have to go in and press several buttons and click in my name and all kinds of things in order to unblock you on Facebook. So I know they pay attention to what I'm saying, and I know people are sending them the stuff that I'm saying. So the fact that I've been saying this whole time, are y'all lying about the footage you have or what's going on, and nothing has changed? I really do feel like what they have is silent. And if that's the case, and if that's the truth, then who had their hands in this stuff beforehand? Who in the neighborhood was given access by the cloud with the username and the password that could go in there and mute footage? That's a serious ass question, because if there's really no car related to this incident, that means the people that did this got there on foot. That means the people that did this knew to avoid that camera. That means the people that did this could play it coy, could play it nonchalant and probably just act like scared, worried friends and say, hey, oh my God, can I look at the footage? We don't know what the hell's going on here, and neither does the state. Neither does Moscow. The FBI is the only one that knows the effery that they pulled here. Other than the feds, and maybe only a handful of feds, there's no telling who really knows what. But I promise you, MPD doesn't know shit. But Steve does admit that there are a lot of sounds on the Linda Lane camera. He says something was going down on that audio from L Lane. It just wasn't at 1122 King Road. So he definitely listened to it. I can't tell what Brett Norton asked him. I have no idea. It's way too blurry because, again, this is a screenshot of a screen recording.
Why don't we make it also clear that we screen shared my entire phone and I let you do whatever? She was like, touch this, click on this, because you can see if things are like edited or whatever. Like I let her literally told her she could log into my Facebook if she wanted. She can have it all. Like just so y'all know, like I ain't got nothing to hide. I'm like, well, so what do you need from me? I went through. We sat on the phone for how many hours and just went through everything. Like these aren't
3.5 hours of screen recording.
These are in messages, going to the message, scrolling, clicking, whatever, just to be really clear.
So stuff was moving as the screenshots were being taken. And if you've ever tried to take a photo of like your animal or your kid or something that was moving, you know it does this. But his response to whatever is being said here is, I can check. Also, Jack D helped us get this footage. It was a friend of the girls. But this is where I got the screenshot from that I posted in my community tab the other day, that it wasn't Olivia that went knocking to get this, that it was Jack Ducour that apparently went over to 1112, or maybe he contacted them via phone. I don't know how close they were, and got the footage. But do they have like an SD card that they made a copy of? Were they given a username and password the same way that Maury was given a username and password on 1113? How did this go? I would really like to know the very specifics about how this all happened. Now, again, this one's really blurry, and it says, I know the cops, something traced him on corners to the drive-through. I'm not really quite sure what the frick that says or what's going on with that comment. I have no freaking idea. It's so blurry that I can't tell. Now, this is where they're discussing the other Linda Lane camera with the dumpster, which is also super interesting because at this point, if Steve really does have 1112, then he also has the same dumpster guy walking and going up to the dumpster that's in the 1112 camera. And in that section of time, you can hear the sound because we found how lagged, I guess, how delayed the sound was when it came to him actually kicking the dumpster and us actually hearing the thud. And he also admits to knowing that the white car in that footage has a sunroof that turns around, and he talks about the timing of the sunroof car. So this is where she's asking Steve if she can take the surveillance footage and put it over on TikTok, and he's asking her what TT is. And she says it's social. And then he says, we're trying to find out who these kids are and if they've been interviewed. And I think they're talking about this right here. This is something that Brett Norton discussed with Melissa Jade on the live, because in this screenshot, she thinks that one of these people are wearing some sort of like mask on their face, and not like a pandemic mask. And she's like tripping, and she goes into great detail about why she thought that and everything else. But then she also claims that was before she went crazy. Girl, I don't know about that, but you know what? That's just a little bit of detail, and we just gonna keep on going. I do know that some people think this might be Ethan. I know people have looked at this and have wondered if this was Ethan. I don't know if it was Ethan. I have no idea. I just know what people have been trying to figure out. That's one of them. Now, she is saying that it might be Hunter Johnson in the middle. And Steve says, we've been keeping track of the prosecution and making sure they don't drop anything in way of making sure that people are being interviewed. But that's also not very true, because he just said that even people being cleared, that information is not given to them anymore. So I feel like this is once again him trying to make it sound as if he's doing more than he really is, because we already know by now that the state wasn't telling them shit. For years, the state wasn't telling them anything because of how they came out here and put the information out there and didn't care what the cops said and acted like they were just going to do whatever they wanted to. But then when it comes to her claiming that it might be Hunter Johnson in the middle, and let me go back up and show the photo one more time. He says, Hunter's pretty tall, which is true. And she continues to ask if she can post the surveillance, which is interesting. And then Steve says that in the picture, it looks like somebody might be wearing a bow tie. It looks like he came back from a party, and she is continuing to agree. I see hoodies and pants and tennis shoes. I mean, I get where he might be thinking that, maybe right here. But if you look at how baggy the actual shirt is, there's no way that that's a dress shirt. That would have to be like a hoodie. Unless the screenshot's being taken right as he is maybe like untucking a white button-down shirt from his pants. I guess that could be a bow tie. Now that I'm like looking at it deeper, maybe possibly. No, I'm not.
He's getting scared of himself. Not to be that guy, but Abby shouldn't park anywhere here. They told her to park at the bottom part of the lot.
But it's also interesting that we see this because it's making me remember what Molly said about seeing someone in a tan four-door sedan in a white collared button-down shirt that looked like he wasn't disheveled, but he needed to shave, and his hair was like a blondish red. We know that there was the Hunga Dunga formal that Ethan and Hunter went to with their sister just hours before all the crazy shit happened. And we know that there was other stuff going on. So technically there was like a lot of people probably in button down long sleeve shirts, if you really go back and think about the specifics of that night. Now, this is where he admits that he has been in talks with the Chapins, which is honestly what I expected. I expected these families to be working together, but the way that things ended up progressing, it's very, very obvious that the communication between the Goncalveses and the Chapins did not go on for much longer, or at least it wasn't the way that people probably expected it to be. It was probably a lot of spot check stuff like this. I sent it to the Chapins to see if they knew. Mom and Dad said no, but would check with their kids this weekend. Then he says, makes me nervous because they could be minors. I don't want anyone threatening them. They're not involved. I think they live right there. I just wanted to make sure the cops are doing their job. It's also like 12:30 at night, and I don't think that there's people with teenagers that really live in that area. I could be wrong. I understand and I appreciate the fact that he's like, oh my God, we need to be careful. These could be people that are underage. But given this is a college town and it's 12:30 at night, I highly doubt it. He then says, make sure they know they're not involved and they would be witness to the facts, time, date, location, etc. But not really, not if they have no idea who anybody is and wasn't around anyone. Now, here's where she's talking about the mask, and he says, not sure, but people in Idaho stopped using masks pretty early on. I know a lot of certain people stopped using masks pretty early on. Me personally and my family stopped wearing masks pretty early on. We were never tested. We never had to test. We never had any symptoms. We never got the jab. We never did none of the things. My father, on the other hand, did have it along with hypothermia and almost died. My mom and her husband, before he passed away from his cancer, also had it at the same time that the freeze was happening. Both of my parents had it at the freeze in Texas during the pandemic. I know a lot of people lost their lives from it, but that was my experience. Seems like every time I mention that fact on Twitter, people attack me for it. Like, I'm sorry that we have some sort of crazy strong country time freaking immunity. Okay, I'm so sorry, but that's just how it was. So while yes, some people probably did stop wearing masks early on, a lot of people that have OCD when it comes to germs probably didn't. So that's important. She then goes on to give him more information about the James Leonard guy, but he doesn't pay attention. He doesn't even respond. This is his next response. Regarding Linda Lane, I think the audio is real. It's just picking up a fight that is in one of the large apartments that are much closer to that camera. It is over a football field away, and the footage we have is like, okay, 40 feet away, and you don't hear any of that fight at 1:55. It's mostly Anne putting out the weakest footage, hoping to suggest that is all the prosecution has. It just doesn't make sense that everything that leaks is poop the prosecution didn't even use in the grand jury case, which they weren't a part of. So he's sitting here claiming that Ann Taylor is the one who leaked the Linda Lane footage. There was apparently 2 cameras that each had 8 to 10 hours worth of footage, along with footages and things from a few different motion cameras. Sleuthy Goosey apparently watched the footage, the original footage, before it was ever released online. She also claims that once it was released online, she never watched any of the online versions because she knew for a fact that the person that received this footage did not want it released. It was never supposed to hit the internet. It was never supposed to be online. It was supposed to be reviewed and secured because she felt like there was actual evidence on there that, according to what I'm understanding, kind of goes against the official timeline. What Sleuthy Goosey was told is that while this person, and it's a woman, while this person was going through the footage, they heard something towards the beginning of their review that freaked them out and scared them so much that they obsessed over a certain 15-minute segment of the footage for like 2 days, trying to figure out exactly what it was that they were hearing and what to do about it. So there's a lot of the footage, according to that story, that the original person who bought the footage from the apartment owner hasn't seen. So that means that if this is true, then whatever was heard was towards the beginning of whatever the true segment of this footage actually is. I just know that there's several different things going on when it comes to speculation on the Linda Lane footage, but I do know that he has been saying that it could have been the defense for a super long time. And here it is right here. It's mostly Anne putting out the weakest footage. That is a direct accusation that the defense is putting out footage that they knew wasn't going to be used. So you're meaning to tell me that the Linda Lane camera that shows this car that they're claiming is SV1 turning around and doing all these things and all the narrative that they're going to try to tell us happened wasn't going to be shown in court? They've removed all of the timestamps up until the 3:30-ish one where the SV1 vehicle ends up in the Indian Hills area in Moscow. They have removed all of the cameras from Pullman, all of the WSU cameras, because they can't prove it's his car. And because of that 7-minute discrepancy that we heard about at the beginning of 2025, they went ahead and removed all of it. So they're wanting us to believe that he just magically poofed into Moscow at 3:30 and that that's his vehicle. No, that just wasn't going to work. So I just want to show you, like, she just started bombarding him with stuff that he didn't respond to. And Melissa Jade had her open up everything so that she could see, like, what it was that she was sending him. And she was just bombarding him with stuff from her live, it looked like, maybe. I'm not really quite sure, but I'm guessing this is her TikTok because of the name at the top. So this is like the comments on her TikTok that she was trying to send over to Steve Goncalves. And I know that I saw Enon Harsh's name in this, and that's where it's interesting because we heard from Brat Norton herself that when it came to Dot, that after the Dot story started going around, that in order for Brat Norton to be able to discuss Enon Harsh in one of her TikTok lives, I'll stop right here. She allowed Dot to use one of her, Brat Norton's, old TikTok accounts to come in as another person and drop Enon Harsh's name in the chat so that the conversation could get started, so it didn't look like Brat Norton was the one who wanted to have the conversation. This is very much admitted to in the live with Melissa Jade, where the intro and the outro to these videos came from. She admitted to having Dot come in as another person, as a fake person, as a not real person, and bring up a scenario just to get the chat going and get the chat invested. And this time it happened to be Enon Harsh. So keep that in mind. But this is something I find interesting because we know that this was in talks in the very beginning about being what he possibly could have worn if Bryan Kohberger was the guy. This was the outfit that he wore and blah, 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 blah. But what did we find when we went through his receipts? A Dickies beanie for $12.88. Not a full-on coverall that would have been anywhere between 50 and 75 bucks depending on what store you're getting it from. So no, this was false. This was something that was assumed and not true. So he finally gets back to her and he says, yeah, there is a lot of stuff covered here and some confusing information like the Brett comment. But thank you for sharing. It helps build some background information and helps if and when you hear a similar story of details. I'm pretty sure he means Brent because Brent Kopacka was definitely a topic of conversation at this time. But we also know that later on in the conversation at some point, he calls Brent Kopacka a loser. So let's just wait for that one. He then says, we've heard the Hunter came over details, but we didn't have a timestamp. So in big old July of 2023, he has no idea what time Hunter actually got over to the house.
A person that called 911 was accurate on Ashley Banfield's report that it was Ethan's best friend.
Hunter Johnson, right.
And he showed up to the scene at about what time?
According to what I have heard was he wasn't there maybe a couple of minutes before the 911 call was made. From what I understand was that he got a call from the girls and that there was an issue getting into the door, and once he was able to get into the door, 911 was called immediately.
Because that big old lie came from the Goncalveses talking to Drunk Turkey.
Hello, this is Christy Goncalves. Today is June 9th, and I just wanted to confirm that a couple of days ago, I did a phone interview with Daniel from Drunk Turkey to address some rumors that have been going around surrounding the case about my daughter, Kaylee Goncalves, and we were just hoping to provide some clarification on some timelines and some other little things. I hope things get a little bit more cleared up here.
Brett Norton then says here that there's a guy in her chat named Michael Fox saying that 2 or 3 people walked Xana and Ethan back to the house, but we've never heard that information other than right here. And we honestly still don't know really the truth about how Xana and Ethan got to the Sigma Chi party. We've been told for years now that Xana was already there at the Sigma Chi party when Hunter and Ethan got back to Sigma Chi after going to the formal with Maisie and dropping her back off, going inside, stealing some sandwiches, and getting back to Sigma Chi. When Bethany came out and did her interview, she said that Ethan and a freshman came over to 1122. I don't know if she says they walked or drove. I don't remember that detail. But that they came over to 1122 to bring the girls over to the party. But that the freshmen and Maddie and Bethany left before Ethan and Xana. So we don't know how long it was in between. We don't really know even, honestly, the timestamp for this. We just know that the Hunga Dunga party only lasted for like an hour, so we have like a roundabout time. But literally everything when it comes to Ethan and Xana is not specified. It's cloudy. It's mixed up. We have multiple stories. Why is that? Okay, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and end episode 2 right here. I try to do like 30 minutes of raw footage so that I know that by the time I get in there, do the editing, add my details and my receipts and all the things like I normally do, it won't be too long, but it'll be long enough to give enough detail. Now, we're going to continue, like I said, until we're done going through all of these messages, because there's a lot of stuff in there that Steve Goncalves never got answers for, that the public never got answers for, and there's a lot of things in there that proves that Steve Goncalves was responsible for a lot of the misconceptions and a lot of the confusion. And we need to wade through every single syllable of it in order to get down to the truth. So that's what we're doing. And again, if you missed episode 1, I'll have a link for that one down in the description box. But for now, let me know how you guys are feeling about all of this stuff down in the comments. And just FYI, I will be getting a video out pretty soon that I'm going to title The Tale of Two Nortons, because there still seems to be people confused about which Norton is which. Some people think that the WSU BK Norton and the TikToker that was talking to Steve Goncalves, Brat Norton, are the exact same people, and they're not the exact same people. I don't even think they know each other. I really don't even think they know each other. That could be wrong, but I really don't think so. So I'm going to get something short and sweet out pretty soon about that, just to clear up any misconception. That way I can just send people over there to watch that video if they're confused. But again, for now, let me know what you guys are thinking about all of this down in the comments. If you like the way that I present this information and give my opinion, please don't forget to leave a like on the way out. Subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed already. And please don't forget to make sure that that notification bell is set to all so you don't miss any of my rants, reviews, reactions, updates, or deep dives. See y'all.